Hello, we have a keyframe coach review here. This is a shot by Victoria, and Victoria said this is a stand-up animation, an assignment made during a body mechanics class. They tried to include some storytelling in their shot, but they're also not sure if it looks entertaining enough. It would be interesting to learn what they could have done better. Cool. So let's take a look at the shot a couple of times and see what we think. Some really nice posing off the bat. This is really appealing. Pretty cool rig. Okay, nice. Yeah, like I said, some really nice posing. I think this is super nice. To be honest, she gets into a nice pose here as well. I think in terms of posing, if anything, this could maybe be pushed a little bit. Kind of feels like she gets into a bit of a listening pose. If anything, this is feeling like a little bit more passive, which is kind of nice. You know, you don't have that super instant like, huh, what's going on? It's more of a, well, there's something going on over there. And then I feel like you can push the spacing into the next pose, but also push the pose itself to just be a little more contrasted to what you have here. You know, maybe shoulder up a little bit more, maybe just a bit more bent over. The shoulders like a bit pushed. Head is a bit more down maybe. Eyes are a little bit more. I know they don't have a mouth, but this elbow could potentially be out a little bit more. Not sure it needs to be a point. Could potentially be like a hand. Me? Just I don't know. A point feels a little bit more unnatural to me than sort of going me. It's me. I probably would go with the hand on the chest, but honestly, really like this kind of straight arm you've got. Definitely keep that straight. But we're getting that shoulder up. It sort of gives us a little bit more contrast, a little bit more of a angle, a bit more of a bend. Cool. Then we got some mechanics at the end, which we can go into. So in terms of beat, I feel like this is working pretty nice. I kind of like the like she feels a bit more relaxed, and she kind of changes that attitude going through the shot. So it's kind of nice to start with this. I do feel like you could have a bit more up and down on the shoulders. So it's a bit more like at the moment it kind of feels like you go and then just stay in there, and you could just have a bit more. Not so much like that, but it could be just a little snappier and a little bit more. Just amp it up a little bit more. And that's maybe a general note throughout the whole animation. Just could all be amped up just a bit. Could push things just a bit more. Can probably stand to push the face a little bit more as well. I'm not sure what kind of range you have on the rig, but could potentially just get these eyes a bit more open. Though that's not a major note, and maybe it's better to keep that closed, more closed here, and then as we get into this, really save that shock for this moment, where perhaps these are just a bit more open. So you can just kind of feel a bit more white in those eyes to see the sort of surprise and panic. I do think the idea is clear. Once you've watched it a few times, I just think there's potential for it to be even clearer. In terms of that head turn, which is kind of the first real body mechanics-y thing that happens in it. Well, I guess it's all body mechanics, but in terms of the head turn, I feel like you could get a bit more rotate Z in there, rotate Z. Because first of all, it kind of feels like the neck is moving in an isolated way here. So the neck kind of reaches its maximum point at this moment. And then the head kind of finishes off that rotation. It would kind of be nice to get maybe this head just... So if we're maybe a bit more like this kind of orientation. So you just kind of get one of those where it's just a bit more lead with that rotate Z. At the moment, it kind of feels a bit isolated to, first of all, the neck movement, but also that rotate X is doing a lot of work at the end. It just kind of feels like you're almost getting there and then going like that. So it'd be nice to add in some Z to that to also resolve, well, not so much to resolve the Z, but the line of action of the neck, it feels like could be improved so that we maybe end up with something a bit more in this region. And then the neck kind of resolves at the end with the head finally getting into position. But you could also snap that up, just not snap it up, but just make the timing of that just a little bit tighter so it's a bit more, or just, it can be casual. It's just, I think you want to, through the middle, just increase the spacing so it's maybe a bit more like, at the moment it kind of feels like you're doing a bit too much isolated movement in all of your axes. I'd just kind of get them not completely moving all at the same time, just a little offset compared to sort of like 5 or 6 frames of offset that we have here. That makes sense. I do think this hand, when I look at it, is kind of doing a little bit too much at times. Kind of goes from open to closed. I could see the reason for closing it, but to be honest, I don't think you need to. I think maybe a very slight sort of just compression in those fingers could potentially could work, but I think the big change in pose is maybe unnecessary for that motion there. I would just kind of keep it open if you're going to open it again, and then close it when it comes down on the chair here. And I like what's going on with the putting the arms on the chair. Similar to the head note, I feel like you could just play with the timing of when she finally gets into this pose. It kind of feels nice, and then when we get to here, it does begin to feel a bit linear coming into this, and I kind of just want to be held in that pose like this part of the animation. See how that kind of feels like we're just reading that pose, and it sort of feels like we're using about 20 frames to really ease into that, and we can just be a bit tighter with our ease, so we kind of come around and we're just in that pose rather than sort of like easing into that final pose so much. Just to hold that pose a bit stiller, just take out some of that move and hold, basically. Do you like the snappiness of that movement? I think it feels nice. To me, I feel like you're too quickly going into that me beat. I feel like because you do the 2 beats where it's like me, it would almost be nice to save that second gesture for the second part where it's kind of like, what's going over there? Me? You know, she's almost like, huh? And then you get that she's saying me. Like she's almost gesturing, and they're like, come. And then she's like, me? Okay, yeah, and then goes, you know? The fact that she's sort of looking over and then instantly goes, me? To me, it doesn't read as super clear what exactly is going on there. Like if you were going to do that, you'd almost want to do, if I was acting it out, just so she's kind of looking out, and then maybe like a me, and then go into it, you know. So you could have a kind of different acting choice there. But the acting choice that it is right now, which is kind of the instant looking out, me, it's kind of doing the same thing rather than looking me. So maybe you do want to play with that and have her go back. So she's like, what? Me? Are you sure? And then goes. But just make sure that every beat that you have in there, because those are 2 separate beats, you know, this is beat and then a beat and then a third beat. Make sure that all of those beats, you know what the beat is in terms of that story, in terms of the acting, in terms of the entertainment. You know, she's at that moment, she's heard them say, come, we need someone to help us save someone's life. We need you. We need whatever this lady in the chair's name is. We need you to come and save this person. Make sure that we get that from her action, you know, and that might be her kind of quite happily looking over there, and then she kind of goes, what is she talking to? She's talking to me? What do you mean me? Okay. And then, you know, that to me is a bit clearer than kind of what's going on here. I'm not exactly sure what the intention is exactly supposed to be. So just, especially with pantomime, you know, you might as well, there's no voice acting here, there's no dialogue, there's nothing before or after the story to help us with that stuff. So you kind of really want to overplay that, and maybe it's a bit overacted to go, huh? Or what's going on here? Do you guys know? But, you know, in order to sell that and get the entertainment across, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like super realistic. So she's kind of like, you know, doing realistic, overacted movements. You know, we're making cartoons at the end of the day, and you want to tell a story as clearly as possible. And if that involves being a little bit overacted or a little bit over animated when you don't have the aid of other storytelling devices like dialogue or music or anything, then why not overplay it? Just a little bit though, not too much. Just want to test. Okay, my microphone is working. Ooh. Okay. To me, it kind of feels like after that second one, she'd want to have more like energy. So it's kind of like, what do you mean? Me? And then kind of she could be in that moment of like panic, but because she's kind of like having to like fly into action and be as quick as possible in order to save this person's life, I assume that's what you're going for in the story. She's a lifeguard and she's about to go and save someone. I feel like you can get the tension, get the panic in there by having a kind of, not necessarily just like shaking the whole time or anything, but just having a bit more like, okay, and then, you know, going for the lifesaver device. It's not called that, is it? I don't know what it's called. Life floaty thing? The floaty. I can call it a floaty. But before going for the floaty, you kind of want her to feel like, okay, yeah, this is, this is obviously probably based on her being like, me? What do you mean, me? Okay, this is maybe her first time, and she's kind of like, oh, just anything to get that character across, and for her to just kind of go, me? And then burst into action. It doesn't sell it the same way in terms of, like, how experienced is she? Is she super experienced and she just didn't hear that the person was drowning, or like she's not sure if someone needs help, in which case why would she be saying me? So I'm assuming that she's kind of like me because she's inexperienced and maybe this is her first time, a real emergency has happened. So just making that clear in your animation by maybe making them, okay, what was the step one is, and then kind of like going through a million things in her head instantly and just kind of panicking. I really want to feel that panic in her, I feel, just to get more character, more story across in this animation. If entertainment is what you're going for, which from your message it sounds like it is. And then in terms of pushing things, I feel like we can. So I really like this adjustment that you do on the leg to get a weight over there. Though having her hips come up before that leg plants doesn't make a whole ton of sense. I'd probably just keep that hip planted until that weight is fully over this leg. So have the hips still planted there. The body can kind of start to lean over as you have. Because you almost want to, if we're thinking about a get up animation, you kind of want to get your weight over. You want to, if you're doing a stand up, you want to do that lean forward and then do the stand. So it kind of apply. I know she's kind of like rushing off of her chair here. You just want to make sure that you're transferring that weight so that makes sense. So she can start to kind of lean over there, and then as she begins to lift off of that chair, just want to see between these frames what's going on. Maybe even be a bit higher by this point. Just flick between them. And maybe, this isn't so tilted, so maybe more at that angle here with this hip. And then I do quite like what you have going on here. So that can kind of stay quite similar. Which then kind of gives you a bit more of a C shape through there. C shape in the spine. So this would just give you maybe a little bit more. A little bit more straightness in this leg. Because this hip is just raised a little bit more because the weight is here. The weight sort of travel to over here. Maybe here. Around here. Weight. So that means that this hip would go up. And actually, you could probably just push this slightly in terms of this. So we get a nice line of action through here. This shoulder's kind of like leaning down. And this arm is maybe a bit more up. Probably get her head a bit more 3/4. Just so we get a bit more of a read on her face. Maybe something here. And then I would actually keep, if possible, I don't hate that you move this leg. I think that would help with nervous energy as well. But there's not a massive reason to move that leg. So maybe we actually enhance what's going on here and keep that leg a bit more planted and just end up with a nicer line through here. And I'd probably actually, in this antic pose, just have a bit more of an angle in this chest and a bit more. In fact, you might even be able to, you know, have a really pushed kind of arm. So we get a bit more storytelling. So you could sort of sell the antic. Gonna just to help that flow through those arms, if you can. Imagine like an invisible line through those arms. And maybe even this head comes a bit more over. And we've actually, and by head coming over, I mean rotating the entire body. So this stays a bit further over. Weight's kind of here. This is maybe too pushed, but the claw, antic, grab. This is probably like leading that motion down now, where this is not quite coming up yet. I'll probably keep this arm going just a bit longer. So what do we have here? Maybe this is a bit more open to us, open to the camera, which also gives us kind of something a bit more in this region. See how you get a nice hold there through that arm? And then since that's coming down, do we want to, let's see what we want to do with that. Yeah, probably want to get something a bit more like this. So the arm is kind of breaking around here. This stuff all seems to be making a bit of sense. I think this can be held just a little longer so that we don't get such a break in that leg so soon. Again, we kind of want to be seeing her face through here, if we can. Want to see what that expression is doing, how she's feeling in that moment. I don't want this part, if we track through here, to feel like it gets too stuck after that point. See how it kind of gets stuck? And it feels like, because this, if we look at this part and we look at this part, by this part I mean the chest, and then we look at the hips. If we look at the chest, that's coming over sort of in an isolated way because the hips are pretty stuck in this kind of area through that part, which just gives it a little disconnected feel. So actually, I think what would be a better thing to do is continue through to this pose to kind of bring the hips a bit more further over. Let's have a look. Where would they be? Maybe the hips have come to here. We're really driving through this. We've got all the weight over here, right? And this is, you know, just starting to come through. By having this elbow out, we're kind of leading with that arm. But you know, if you have it in, you kind of don't get so much 3D out of the arm. If you grab something and then you're kind of like that, you really read that you've like led with that arm, you know, if that makes sense. So just continue to lead with that shoulder up, just to drive like through the motion. Actually, it ends up overlapping a bit there. Just looking for balance in the pose as well as lines of action, and just now trying to work out what that back arm would be doing. Maybe something like this. Ooh. So actually, through this bit, we're maybe starting to just come down, particularly with this upper arm, so we get something a bit more. I'm being pretty loose with these because, you know, and maybe this line of action. Being pretty loose just so I can kind of get the flow, which is the more important thing. Obviously, we want to be feeling, you know, her chest down here. I think that could help. Let's just draw that part again. Down here, feeling this kind of C shape. That, if those squiggly lines make sense, but I think they do. And then I think through here, just want to skip ahead a little. It's kind of nice, and it feels like we could drive through a bit more, and just this knee wants to like drive through and start a big jump out of this to give it more energy. You know, you're almost doing like this big antic down here on this side where the hips are really coming over. You want to jump out of that. So I would bring the hips up more here. We kind of have maybe something more in here. Let's see. And then maybe you get a kind of just beginning to come off there. And then this one is, you know, driven through. Not quite sure what this one will be doing yet, but we'll come back to that. Just a couple more things to work out, I guess. See how we're getting like a big spacing move through here of her head? Just kind of feels like that should be just held back. Have a look. So the weight is still on that side and just starting to move over maybe. So let's have a look at what that should be doing of the hips. Boom. And then we got boom. Maybe we're just coming over now. So maybe the No, I think it would be doing this, honestly. The hips would be coming up, chest would kind of be like this. And see how that arm then kind of works to drive through to get her up and over. And I think we've actually jumped a bit too far here. So we would kind of be doing a bit more in this region, I feel. I mean, this might even be like down here coming back. The issue is it kind of feels like a bit disconnected right now. Like you've got this kind of motion just almost like blending from there to the run. So you really want to feel that like a big jump out of there into kind of what you have here. Let's say I don't know what I've done with that arm. Maybe it's more just like this for now. I want to make sure we get that nice up pose. So you're almost like jumping into that first run pose, which is actually something, you know, around here. You know, we kind of want to work to then jump into that pose. Just delete some of that. Probably want to be planting about here. And silly me. This should actually be down. Planted. Jump into big pose that's up higher than this. And what you're missing from your run cycle is a pose where both feet are kind of, I mean, you're missing this pose that's kind of should be the up pose. So this is like up here, and then this is maybe more pushed, and this is more up. The Mario pose, basically. So if I flick through that, I think it should make sense. I just want to add as well, I feel like another thing is just having a bit more up down through here. Quite a high energy moment, so I feel like that could be pushed as we go through here. You can see if you look at sort of this line, it feels a little bit flat through there, and that could just be pushed quite a lot. So if I didn't mention it through this pose, it's kind of like boom, and then we want to down before jumping into this final pose, right? So just make sure that's kind of up. I mean, her torso itself is coming up through there, so maybe the head won't actually change too much, but certainly these hips will. Just as you kind of plant that foot down, you want to then take the weight through there. This is maybe just after the actual low point, but you know. Kind of see how having a bit more up down in there just adds to the energy quite a lot. And maybe this one went a little too much. That headspace just a little bit too pushed. So hopefully if I play through, those drawings do make sense. Put them with tracing paper. Yeah, took a few drawings to work out that last bit, but the crux of it is kind of getting to a point where you're jumping into that first run pose and make sure that you're kind of driving through with things that help to get into that. So you kind of need to bring this arm back to then fling it forward to jump into that first pose. You know, it's kind of like, and then use the energy from that to start that big transition into it. Yeah, lovely work, Victoria. If anyone's out there looking for an animation review, feel free to go on keyframecoach.com and you can purchase an animation view today. Just can't ever get that salesman pitch right. There's always some part that I mess up. If you want an animation review today, you can go on keyframecoach.com and purchase one. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it. And thank you for purchasing a review, Victoria. See you guys.